Welcome back to the course. This is a course on Introduction to Human-Computer Interaction. We are continuing on the topic on usable security. I hope you were able to actually understand the slides with respect to different types of solutions on usable security, and also thought about some aspects of usable security problems in the last 1 week. I'm going to continue the lecture where I left last time. This is the slide. This is the last slide we had in the last week's lecture, which is different iterations that we did while building the Fish Guru solution. The one on the left top is the first iteration, and then it continues till the right top corner, and then the iteration continues until the left bottom corner. I'll walk you through each one of the designs that we made, and I'll actually talk about what are the different design decisions that we made. So I think one of the big things that you will end up making while building solutions is actually make these kind of design decisions, and these design decisions actually are the important decisions that you make while designing any systems. The first intervention that we built. So this is just a very simple version where it just shows that the link in the email, so there is an annotation saying that the link in the email is not the same as the link that it is actually taking you to, which is the link in the email says amazon.com, whereas if you look at the URL at the bottom of the browser, you will see that Amazon account.net/exec, which is not the domain that it is showing you in the email. That's the first iteration. Here is the second one, which is very similar to the first one because the first one has the URL itself. In the second one, the URL in the email is not the domain name and everything. It is just clicking here. Again, the URL that it is taking you to is very different from what the email is supposed to be saying, right? The email is actually from eBay and the URL is actually kusi.org, which is very different. Here is another design. This design is probably the first design where we kind of thought about presenting the email itself to the user, showing that these are the annotations in the email which you should be looking for. Some parts of the email that you already know, for example, left and top corner, you already know what is presented there, which is some information about the system itself. And there are these characters that we have put there which shows which presents these information. A revision to your amazon.com information and from Amazon, service at amazon.com is highlighted. It says professional and legitimate looking design, and next it says urgent message in the text, account status thread, links don't match with status bar when mouse is moved over. Right? So that's the connection from the first two designs also, which is link is not matching. One of the main reasons why these phishing emails are so effective is that the only difference from the legitimate email for a phishing email is just the link that it is taking you to, that link, and some parts of information, which is that it presents with urgency about something. It presents about some status, something is changing, account is changing. You have to actually verify your account and all of that, and of course the link itself. This is on the left hand side. On the right hand side, if you see, it is presenting information about what is a phishing scam, what are the simple ways to protect yourself from phishing scams. Continuing with the designs, let me walk you through other designs. Here is another one. So in this case, what we did was we converted the information that is presented mostly like in the textual form in this design that is flashed on the screen towards a design which is more cartoonish, right? Cartoons, I mean, I'm sure many of you read cartoons. The information is presented in a very cartoon, for example, Tintin type format, right? All the information that is there in this slide in this design is very similar to the one that's on the screen that the earlier design, right? But it just said it's presented in a way that this cartoon is actually talking to you. Scammers plan attacks. I can make a professional and a legitimate looking website, email impersonating a well-known company. So this is kind of the information that is there on the left hand top corner of the cartoon strip. And then it goes on to the right. I will force the sender's address to look genuine, and I will threaten users' account status with urgent message and everything, right? So these are kind of messages that are information that are presented even in the earlier design. And then at the bottom one, you will see, for example, user receives scam. Let's check what a new email is all about. It's asking for my ID and password, and a link looks suspicious. I will never click on link within emails. I will type in amazon.com in a new browser. I will find and call real customer service center. I will never give up personal information upon email request, right? So these are kind of the, so to say, instructions that we want the users to read. Here is another design. This design became more the standard design that we started following after some point of evaluation, which I'll talk about as we move forward. So here, there were multiple characters created. One is the fisher, so to say, which is on the left and top, and then there is a victim, and then there's also this fish guru character per se itself. So the fisher character is represented on the top strip, which is I can create my own emails, I forge addresses, this email looks very professional, I'll send it to thousands of people, and then victim is getting the email, and fish guru is saying stop, follow these steps when reading your email, never click on links, find and call a real customer service, all of that. And then at the end, the victim says, thanks fish guru, I will never let fisher steal my identity. There's a lot of design principles that were used in creating these designs, which I'll walk through one by one as we move forward later. I'll look at this. So one interesting experience about the character here is that this character, we created this character because of probably to some extent bias from our side, bias from my side in terms of creating a stereotypical character for, let's take, teacher or a guru or a person who's actually well educated, all of that. But unfortunately, I got a very, from the user studies, I got a lot of inputs on not to have these kind of stereotypical characters. So we ended up actually changing the character, changing the fish guru icon, so to say, to something which is gender neutral. Gender neutral helps because it is helping you to understand there is no bias when people are actually reading these instructions, materials from a gender neutral character. That's the reason why we went from a character which is biased towards a character which looks at least gender neutral. So the fisher, the victim, all information is just the same. We just changed the character there. And even in this case, we were actually modifying the instructions to look very different. For example, in this design, there's only fisher, victim, and fish guru. Look at this design. There is fisher characters changed, a victim character changed to some extent, information presented slightly differently, where the instructions have come on the top right.
From this design, what we did was we also did some focus group discussions with different age groups to understand what they think about these designs. Interestingly, we did focus group discussions with people of different age groups. For example, one was between 18 and 55. The other one was actually more interesting, which is 65-plus-year-old people were part of the focus group discussion. All groups, all age groups will read the interventions. At least they said that they will read. Everybody liked the goldfish and the comic script. Participants did not like the fisher character. So these kind of characters, some participants were not very appreciative of the character per se itself. So keeping that feedback in mind, we updated the design, and what we had was we ended up having two different designs. So one is the one that's on the slide now, which is looking at the fisher, the victim, the fish guru characters, instructions, all of it as in before, only the fisher character slightly modified. Look at the other one. This one is more a conversation type between two people. So left and top, if you see, do you know any time an email asks you to take an urgent action and type in your account number or social security number? It is probably a scam. Really? How do I protect myself from these scams? So it's like a conversation between two people, and the same instructions are presented, and fisher was also, gender was changed for the fisher. And the conversation ends by saying that thanks, where can I learn more? And the character saying that go to this URL. So those are the final two decisions that we ended up actually using in a large number of studies, which I'll go through one by one now. So as we have seen in the content before in the last few weeks, that one of the important aspects of this course is evaluation, right? You have to design, you have to understand what to design, iterate it, and then go ahead and evaluate it. I think scientifically evaluating what you have created is actually one of the strengths of the HCI, so to say, topic. And if you become a user experience engineer, if you become a user experience product manager, your goal will be actually to evaluate scientifically and evaluate very comprehensively the product that you have built. So let me walk you through some evaluations. So first, the simplest ones, which is a lab study that we did to show that the security notices that we get in email, or which is presented on a website saying protect yourself from fake emails, or read this privacy policy to understand what changes have happened in Facebook, nobody reads any of them, right? So that's the first conclusion that we wanted to actually draw. Security notices are an ineffective medium for training users. User educated with embedded training make better decisions than those sent security notices. That's a simple comparison that we did, which is to compare users who got the security notices in email and who got these PhishGuru emails in their email. And then we found that people who got this training through PhishGuru was able to make decisions on the on the phishing emails better than the ones that got only in security notices. Here's another study that we did. So this is a picture of a user who's actually sitting in the lab doing the study, where this person is acting as an executive assistant for somebody, and they're actually going through the emails of that they have received and doing actions as mentioned in the email. For example, one email was mentioning that please get an appointment for me to meet with somebody, and please click on this link to get, we are arranging a conference, please click on this link to let us know how many people from your organizations are attending. These kind of emails which look slightly legitimate also, and we got the participants to react to these emails, and as and when they react, we would capture how they reacted and use it for our analysis of how they reacted with the phishing email. So anyway, many of the emails that we kept were just buffer emails to see how users react to generally emails, but our focus wasn't only on studying the phishing emails that we sent. Users educated with PhishGuru retain knowledge after 7 days. Retain knowledge is that knowledge retention is nothing but if I teach you, for example, now I'm teaching you HCI, that I taught you about a way of evaluating a solution, and you, for example, focus group discussion, you will understand what a focus group discussion is in this context. Let's take after a few days. That's called knowledge retention. And knowledge transfer, which also we evaluated, is that knowledge transfer is given that you learned it in one context, can you apply it into a different context and use that knowledge that you gained. That's called knowledge transfer. So these two are interesting metrics to evaluate in knowledge science or learning science domain. Users trained with embedded did better than users trained with non-embedded, which I think we proved even in the study one. The next study that we did was interesting is because it was a study that was done in the real world for the first time, where we partnered with a Portuguese ISP, and the ISP actually was ready to do these kind of PhishGuru emails to their employees, and we wanted to study how the employees behave with these kind of emails. So this was the introduction to taking the study, which was done mostly in the lab, to actually a real world experiment. And nothing was controlled. Given that it's a real world, we can't control really anything except for the all employees being from this company. Nothing was controlled. PhishGuru is effective in training people in real world. Trained participants retain knowledge after 7 days of training. So those are the two important conclusions. All of these research are published as papers. I put the citations at the bottom of the slide, so if you're interested, feel free to take it. The instruction here, which says in Portuguese about please be aware of links in emails. We translated all the designs that we developed into Portuguese and sent the designs to the company for them to host it and get the phishing emails. When clicked, the users were redirected to this particular training material.
So continuing on the topic, now I'll walk you through another study that we did where we tried studying the PhishGuru and the embedded training system in the campus Carnegie Mellon University. So here, what the goal for this study was to find out how effective this training methodology is in real world. and for a long period of time. In the study done in Portuguese, it was done for a week, whereas in study done in CMU, it is actually going to be for 4 weeks to study how effective this training material is. And the goals are evaluate effectiveness of fish crew training in the real world, investigate retention after 1 week, 2 weeks, compare effectiveness of 2 training messages with effectiveness of 1 training. Basically, the goal is to find out if I get you to see only 1 training message, how effective you are in terms of identifying phishing emails, versus if I get you to see 2 training messages. That's the goal. So let me walk you through what the study design is. And given that it's an HCI course, let's spend more time on actually studying the study design, decisions that were made, and how the emails were sent out and what kind of data was collected. So emails were sent out to CMU students, faculty and staff, whoever said that they would like to participate in the study. Emails were sent out. 3 conditions were kept, going back to the discussion that we had before about within study and between study design. Control condition, 1 training message and 2 training messages, and emails were sent out for a period of 28 days. And at the end, exit survey was filled by the participants on the day of 35. And definitely to study the false positive effect of false positive messages, we wanted to actually send out legitimate emails. That is, if I send out a legitimate email before you're getting trained on phishing, which says that don't click on links, if the legitimate email has a link, the way you would behave should not change after I have trained you about not to click on links. These are called false positive errors. So false positive should not change when I do the intervention for training you on embedded training. So if you really look at what study design to be done, again, I'm connecting to the point of between study design and within study design that we saw, which is in one method where you have 2 sets of people looking at 2 designs, A and B, that you've built, whereas in the other study design you will have a large set of people looking at both the designs. And there are pros and cons that we saw in all of these designs. So I let you to think about what design would you have if there was a design called Fish Crew, and let's consider Fish X as another solution. If you were to evaluate these 2 designs, what kind of study design would you have? And please post it on the mailing list. We can see what are the different methods that people think about evaluating these 2 designs. Now let's look at I'm assuming that you would have thought about how study, what are the different ways to evaluate these 2 systems. But let me give you the answer for how you can actually evaluate them. The 2 alternatives that you can think of. One is between group design, the other one is within group design. Between group design is the design where you have 2 groups of test users. Each group uses only one of the systems. Like for example, let's take you want to test Apple iPhone versus the Android phone. You get 10 participants use Apple iPhone, 10 participants use the Android phone. That's all. Whereas in the within group, 20 participants actually get to use the iPhone and Android. They get to use both the systems, but some users would get to use the iPhone first and some users would get to use the Android phone first. And clearly you can see that between subject design requires more participants than within, because you have because you have only one set of people using one of the systems that is built. So now I'll let you to actually think about what are the pros and cons of these design methodology itself, right? Because in the within group, you're going to have the problem of if I get to see Apple first versus if I get to see Android first, the learning effect is also there. What I see first will actually influence what I see next. And there are many other design constraints also actually having in both of them, which is between and the within design. So now let's go back to the study design. Unique hash in the URL for each participant has to be kept, because the problem is if I have a user who gets my phishing email, I want to actually track the user until they have clicked on the link, they have given the information, so that I can keep track of who this participant is. Interestingly, we also got the demographics and department status data for each of the participants. So we could actually keep this hash and track the user, which user is following, which user is giving away the information, which user is not even clicking on the link. We also did one thing which was very much necessary, that we spoke to the help desk of the campus to tell them that if anybody forwards this email to you, you should actually respond it in this canned manner. Because what would happen is, let's take if somebody sends out, forwards the phishing email that we sent to the participants, forwards to the IT help desk, and IT help desk forwards it to everybody in the campus saying, here is a phishing email, then I think that the whole study would, the study design and the whole purpose of the control thing that we were trying to do in terms of the emails getting out to all the participants would be lost. The purpose of the study would be lost. So we were trying to control that by letting the IT help desk also be part of the study itself, and let them give them a canned message which they would send out to somebody emails them, this is a phishing email. Now let me walk you through the study schedule. So this slide is slightly dense. Let me slowly tease apart the content in this slide, and hopefully you will be able to understand how complicated the study was. So let's go over the first column. First column is the day of the study, 0, 2, 4, 7, 14, 16, 21 and 28. These are the days in which when the emails were sent out. 3 conditions in the study: control, now I'm looking at the row, control, 1 training and 2 training message, control, 1 training and 2 training message. And now on day 0 there was a test email and a real email that was sent. The reason why you want to send out test and real and any of these kind of testing should happen on control condition is that you want to know what the baseline is of the participants without any interventions. If you look at the column for the control, there is no intervention, which is more so like a training message in this case. It's all test and real, test and real, test and test and real. That's for the control group. So that would just show you what the baseline is. 1 training message, train and real on day 0, test and real, test and test and real. The reason why you want to have real on day 0 with all the 3 conditions is that with the real you will be able to understand how they react to a legitimate message that is sent before the training has happened, before any intervention has happened, right? So in that case you will be able to understand baseline for not just in the control group, baseline for 1 training message and 2 training message also. So this would just tell you how participants in the 1 train message and the 2 train message reacted to the email, which was a real email, before they were exposed to training. So if the training works well, the responses that we should have on the real in day 0 and the real in day 28 for 1 training should not be very different. That's the intention, or that's the, so to say, expectations of the training influence. It should not influence the users just to become too scared about the training messages. Don't click on links, therefore I'll stop clicking on any links that I get in the email. We want to avoid that. A training methodology should avoid that. 2 training message, last column, train and real on day 0, and then test and real, and then on day 14 there is a train again, which is the participants in this group will get an email. When they click on the link, they'll be taken to the training material that I showed you. Then there is test and real, and then post survey on day 25 for all the 3 conditions. So what does this help? This methodology. So the reason why I'm going through this study design slightly more in detail also is that any study that you do, you should be able to represent it in this way, where you can walk through the study design in detail, giving the details about what data you collected and how you collected the data. So I hope that helps. If any questions, please drop it on the mailing list. So simulated spear phishing messages. So here, if you look at the message, it's clearly as plain text. There is no images, nothing, and there is also a URL which is not hidden in this case. andrewwebmail.org is not the real URL for going and checking the emails in the campus. And if you look at it, there's also this ID equal to 09009, which is the user for us to track. And when they clicked on the link, they'll go to this page, which looks very similar to the web ISO secured login page of the campus, and but the URL is very different. And when they give the username and password, they will get this message called "Thank you for updating your password," and the URL will be different. And for the interventions, we sent out the intervention, which is one of the things that I showed earlier. So now let's look at the outcomes. Again, some of these slides are slightly dense because I think it is going to show you the results of the analysis that was done with the data that we received. So in this case, the first column is condition, control, and train. Trained is the summation of the both 1 training and 2 training. N is the number of participants in that condition. Percentage who clicked on day 0 just shows the percentage of people who clicked on the link that was sent on day 0. Percentage who clicked on day 28. So if you look at the percentages of control, 52 and 44, and for the trained, it is 48 and 24. So all the statistics and everything is already written in papers and published. We will not get into the gory details of the statistics between these numbers, but I'll tell you the story, because here if you see in control 52 and 44, there's no statistical significant difference, whereas in the trained 48 versus 24, there is statistical significant difference, and therefore you can argue that the training had some effect in people not clicking on links on day 28. So now if you look at this slide, what it's showing is results conditioned on participants who clicked on day 0, which means people who ever clicked on day 0 is what we are seeing, which is these are the people who clicked on the link when we sent them on day 0, which is day 2, day 7, day 14, day 16, day 21, and day 28. So what does this show? This shows that trained participants less likely to fall for phish, because if you look at the train conditions, which is 1 train or 2 train, all of them are lower than the control conditions. Look at this. This is day 2 is lower, day 7 is lower, day 14, day 16, day 21, and day 28. All of them are lower compared to the control condition, which is even whether you look at clicked and give or only clicked or together, the training condition participants are lesser. Trained participants remember what they learned 28 days later. So how do you find this? This you can see that in day 28, you will see that the percentage of people who clicked and gave and clicked is actually lower than the training material. Training participants remembered what they learned 28 days later, which is the number is not falling down a lot, or number which is basically clicking on is not increasing a lot. We train them on day 2, 1 training material, 1 training and 2 training conditions. If you see the number there, and if you basically look at the numbers that are highlighted, you will understand that the participants in day 28 clicked links, which is statistically very similar to the people who were in day 2, who clicked on day 2. I hope that makes sense. So continuing with the analysis that we saw, which is for conditioned on day 0, we find that trained participants less likely to fall for phish, and trained participants remember what they learned 28 days afterwards. Let's move on to some other analysis. Here is an analysis that will give you another set of insights into the data, which shows that results conditioned on participants who clicked on day 0 and day 14, which is that they have seen both the training materials. Now we are trying to see how these kind of participants behave by taking the data on day 16 and day 21. 2 trained participants less likely than 1 trained participants to click on day 16 and day 21. So how you will infer this? You will infer this by looking at this 2 train bar, which is always less than the 1 train bar in the day 16 and day 21. And you also see that 2 trained participants less likely than 1 trained participants to provide information on day 28, which is to click and give, is lower in day 28 compared to 1 train. I hope that makes sense, right? So what basically it is showing is that it is showing that the training that was done through embedded methodology like PhishGuru helps in people remembering the training and not being able to click on links, not being able to give information even after some time when the training was done. So that's the key crux of the whole number of studies that was done. If you remember, there's another important insight that we wanted to check, whether the training makes users to be more scared and not click on legitimate emails. So that's the table that is provided on the screen now, which is these are the legitimate emails. If you remember, it was sent on day 1 to real. Everything that was real in the table is actually the legitimate emails. So keeping that in mind, so let me go back and show you where the reals are. So if you look at here, the reals are in day 0, and day 0 for all the 3 conditions. And then there is a real on day 7 to all the 3 conditions, right? These are the emails that we have analyzed in this table to show that the training, so if you look at this, which is there is no difference in the control group.
right? So no difference between three conditions, day 0 or day 7 or day 28, which is 50, 41 and 38, there's no difference. 39, 42 and 32, there's no difference. 48, 41 and 50, 35 is no difference. So what does this mean? This means that whatever conditions you are, 1 train, 2 train or control condition, there is no difference between you clicking on the legitimate email between the different conditions on different days. So that's looking at the columns. You can also look at the rows now. There's also another one that you can, no difference within the three conditions for the three emails, right? So what does this show? This shows that there is no difference between, basically there's no difference between columns and rows, right? So that shows that the legitimate emails that were sent to people either before the training or after the training, the difference was very low. Therefore, the training did not impact users on making wrong decisions on true legitimate emails. That just shows that false positive did not increase, in short. So there are many other kinds of data that were collected. For example, some qualitative responses were collected from participants saying how did they like the study, what did they get out of the study, did they like them being stopped in between when they click on the link and everything. So I'm just showing you some qualitative results from the data that was collected on the post study. It just shows I really like the idea of sending CMU students fake phishing emails and then saying to them essentially, hey, you could have just got scammed, you should be more careful, here's how. I think the idea of using something fun like a cartoon to teach people about a serious subject is awesome. So basically here is a summary of the 3 or 4 studies that I showed. The summary is people trained with PhishGuru were less likely to click on phishing email links than those not trained. People retained their training for 28 days, which is they remembered what they were trained for 28 days. 2 training messages are better than 1 training message. If people saw twice the training material, they seem to be more aware and make better decisions compared to 1 training message. PhishGuru training does not make people less likely to click on legitimate emails. That's what I was saying right now, which is legitimate emails. The reactions to legitimate emails did not change because of training. So here is the summary of all the slides. So the last slide just showed you only the, so to say, inferences. This is showing you what all study was done. Lab study 1, lab study 2, which is comparing security notices, making the PhishGuru understand how PhishGuru is working, and effectiveness of PhishGuru evaluation. And real world study 1 is the Portuguese study where the content was converted into Portuguese and evaluated. Real world study 2 showed that it is perfectly possible to train people when these kind of embedded training concepts are applied. So one last thing I wanted to say here before I wrap up this topic of usable security is that training games, right? So it is not only that these kind of serious way methods of training should be taken, which is click on a link, and then when they click on the link it should be training material should be presented and things like that. So you could even make it a fun part, which is so in this case, if in this screen if you see, E is for legitimate URLs, R is for reject phishing URLs, T is for ask father for help. So basically we created a character called anti-phishing fill, which is on the left top, and there's a PhishGuru anyways on the right bottom. So same using learning science principle, teaching teachable moments in terms of making the errors while playing the games and presenting it in fun. Essentially they have to look at this URL in the game and they have to press E, R or T, and depending on how many they get actually score, number of rounds, lives totally that they have was 3, and totally 2 minutes were given to capture about 8 or 7 URLs. So that's another way of actually educating people about phishing and merging the usable security solutions. And the interesting part about this game was when we built it, it became popular where people started playing it very regularly. So you could actually go look up anti-phishing fill, and there's a paper also that we have where we analyzed the data that we got and we analyzed how people actually played this game. So conclusion for this whole usable security area is becoming an important problem to study. I think day by day, the more and more we start using our phones, the more and more we start using more technologies, the whole decision making of usable security is going to be necessary, because
everywhere you're kind of setting your privacy settings, doing a default, changing your default settings and everything. So usable security is becoming more and more important, and definitely a large projects are getting funded. And if you're interested in continuing looking at this problem, I think there's potential ways of solving bigger problems in this area. With that, I'll wrap up the content on usable security. And if there is any questions, please feel free to drop a note on the mailing list and we'll take it from there.